There's nothing worse than missing a perfect wildlife moment because your settings were off. Too slow shutter, wrong aperture, incorrect AF mode, and suddenly the shot is gone forever. But imagine if you could instantly recall your favorite action settings with just one button press. No more menu diving, no more guessing. Today I'll show you exactly how to assign a button on your camera to trigger your best action preset, so that you will never miss those sudden wildlife moments again. I will demonstrate this on my Canon camera, but this function is also available on most modern Sony and Nikon cameras, so just follow along and you can find a way to implement it in your camera as well. If you've ever photographed wildlife, you know that even a calm scene can quickly develop into some very fast action. Predator chases, birds taking off, or any sort of action that can quickly happen. In these moments, you have zero time to adjust settings like the shutter speed, the aperture, ISO settings, or even the autofocus tracking mode. This means if you are using some settings that are not optimized for the action and for the fast movement, the risk of losing the shots and getting some unusable files is very high. You just don't have time to go and dial in these settings, because the time you do it, the action is gone. This is where having a button assigned to recall shooting function really shines and can save your shot. The recall shooting function basically means that we can assign one of our customizable buttons so that when pressed, it will recall some preset camera setup, including all the settings like shooting mode, aperture, shutter speed, and everything else, so that we can instantly press a button and have our camera set for fast action. Of course, we could do this preset also for other types of shot, but I find that the fast action is the most useful. With something slower, we also have the time to manually dial in the settings ourselves, while the fast action is where we need to recall it instantly. Let's see step by step how to set this up. Okay, here is my Canon R5. The process is very similar for all Canon cameras. You just have to find the different voices on a different type of menu, but it's very similar. So we press menu, we navigate to the custom functions menu, we then go to customize buttons, and here we have to pick a button where we want to have this function recall setting. For me, it's usually, can you see it? It's usually this button down here, which is called the depth of field button, because back in the DSLR era, this would trigger the lens to close down the aperture to whatever settings we had, giving a preview of the depth of field through the optical viewfinder. Now this is not a function anymore and I never use this. Also, this button is very handy and very accessible, so I use this one. I will find it here on the menu, depth of field preview button. As you can see, I can assign a whole different array of functions to this one, and I choose register recall shooting functions. And here, as you can see, we can choose what to trigger. Whatever is toggled here will override the settings of the camera and replacing them while we press the button. So the way I want to do it is shooting mode, manual. Shutter speed, I use 1/2000 of a second, which is not super fast. Remember that this is an emergency button. I want this button to be a saver for a broad array of situations, so 1/2000 works pretty well. The aperture, I set it at f2.0 because the fastest zoom I use is the 28-70 f2, and if I have any other lens, like in this case I have a 24-70, which is f2.8 lens, the camera will still push the lens to the widest aperture. Same if I use my 600, the camera will push it to f4. so I will just leave it to f2. ISO speed is set on auto because I want the camera to adjust the ISO based on the situation to get a correct exposure. Now the metering mode, this is interesting because normally I use evaluative metering for all of my shooting. Evaluative means the camera is looking at the whole frame, everything that is in the frame, to judge what a correct exposure is. In this case, I want it to be partial so that the camera will only look at the central area, leaving out the edges. This is because I don't have time to dial in any exposure compensation. So I find that partial metering just works better for this type of emergency scenario. I then leave exposure compensation to 0 because I don't know what situation will be, if it will be too bright or too dark. I will just leave it to 0. Auto white balance enabled. F method, I will leave it to continuous with subject tracking. I will not touch tracking sensitivity or the acceleration of tracking. It's just set in my camera and I never touch it. The AF operation, of course, I want it on because I want the camera to actually focus. And this is basically it. There is an alternative method that we can set all of these functions, and is to actually dial in all of these settings in the camera before opening the menu, and then we can come here and say register current settings. Otherwise, in this case, we already set everything. Now we can just press menu. Now, as you can see, we are at f8. There is some exposure compensation dialed in. ISO is set at 1600. Also, the camera is set in aperture priority, as you can see in the upper left corner. The moment I press this button, the camera will go back to manual mode with all the settings that we chose before. And you see the exposure is adjusting based on where I point the camera. So when will this button come handy? Let's say we are photographing a lion that is resting under a tree. It's a bit dark. We are at 1/250th of a second with manual ISO maybe because we want to perfectly dial in the exposure ourselves. Suddenly a prey passes by and the lion sprints into an action. We don't have time to change anything, but we just press this button here and the camera jumps to the settings that are best for the action. Everything goes quiet again. We just release the button and the camera goes back to our previous settings that we were using. For me, as a wildlife photographer, this function has been a lifesaver in more than one occasion. Hopefully it will be for you as well. If you found this useful, remember to subscribe to the channel, as in the next video we will discuss custom modes and how to apply them to wildlife shooting scenarios. See you there!